What's going on, movie fans? My name is Michael Weir. I love talking about movies, and today we're going to talk about the newest Blumhouse released horror movie called Totally Killer. And Totally Killer released direct to Amazon Prime, skipped theaters altogether, so if you have an Amazon Prime subscription, you can check this movie out right now. And it's your average time-traveling horror slasher movie, all mixed into one. Sometimes those work. Most of the time they don't. This one totally did. So let's do the review for Totally Killer.
Just think, maybe if she did do blowjobs, she'd still be alive.
Yeah, let's not make that the lesson. 80s weed sucks. This is just dirt. Look at all these twigs. I could give you a gummy this big that has 100 times more weed than this.
And so, guys, Totally Killer stars Kernan Shipka, and she's actually the girl who plays Sabrina in The Sabrina Show on Netflix, and you should check that out. There's some good and bad to it, like all things, but more good. I really enjoyed that show. Moving on, though, she plays Jamie Hughes in Totally Killer, and Jamie is a 17-year-old girl that's living her best life, going to rock shows, wearing her mom's vintage 80s clothing. But one day, the Sweet 16 Killer returns. The Sweet 16 Killer is someone who has plagued their area 35 years previously and killed several teenage girls. And now the Sweet 16 Killer is back and kills Jamie's mom. Jamie, of course, is devastated by this, broken up by it, and then the Sweet 16 Killer comes for her. And as she's trying to evade the killer, she accidentally activates a time machine, sending her 35 years into the past to 1987. And that's really where the movie picks up. But she realizes she has the chance to stop the Sweet 16 Killer in the past to save all of the lives of those teenage girls and her mom 35 years from now. That's the best synopsis I have for the movie. If you think that sounds like a good movie, you should go check this thing out on Amazon Prime. And actually, I turned this movie on alone. I watched the first 40 minutes of it, and as I hit that 40-minute mark, it was getting so good, I had to turn it off and wait till I got home to watch the rest of it with my wife. I told her, we've got to watch this thing together because you're going to love it, and we both really enjoyed it. Like I said earlier in the synopsis, the movie really picks up when it hits the 1980s, so we're going to jump right into my likes, and I'm going to say anything done in 1980s is fantastic. Like, once the movie transports you back to the 80s, it picks up a notch. And I enjoy the movie before the 80s and then after the 80s on the front and back of this movie, but anything in that middle of the movie that just happens in the 80s is so much fun. Instantly, when she's transported back, you start hearing 80s music, you start seeing people in 80s clothing, and then there's just things that happened back then that aren't allowed right now, like smoking in cars with kids. Like, that's messed up. You see that and you're like, I can't believe that was a thing, but it really was a thing. And so they play it off as sort of a joke. And then there's the school mascot is the Red Devil, and it's an Indian face, and you're like, oh, that's really horrible now, but back in the 1980s, that's how things were. And so they're able to play off of certain things that were okay back then, but they're definitely not okay now. But not just that, you have just the aesthetic, the look of things, the look of the houses. I just think that all of that worked back in the 80s to now, and you've got people like dressing up as Molly Ringwald because she's actually a big deal back then. Like, it just worked for me. I liked watching everything happen in the 80s. Just the carefree attitude too that police officers or schools had. It wasn't as dangerous back then. You didn't see it as dangerous back then. Maybe it was as dangerous, but they didn't see it like that back then. And so you get to see sort of someone with 2023 vision living in the 1980s, and they're like, oh, that's messed up, that's not right, that's not okay, but she's seeing it through 2023 goggles. And in 1987, it didn't seem like it was wrong. So I just think they did that portion of the movie so well. I also really like the whodunit aspect of this movie. Anytime a horror movie can give you a whodunit aspect where you're like, who is the killer? Like, it's not Michael Myers, it's not Jason, it's not Freddy. You're like, who is the killer? Anytime a horror movie can pull that off, I really like that about a horror movie. And so in this movie, you have a killer who seemingly returns after 35 years. And you're like, well, is it the dad? Is it the friend? Is it this person? Is it the podcaster? Like, who could it be? And there's so many wide variety of characters that it could be. And when you go back in time, all of those characters still exist just as younger versions of themselves. So you really are like, okay, it really could be any of you that I suspected at the beginning of the movie. It could be any of you back then. I really like the whodunit aspect of this movie. They play into it very well. And they actually have something really unique that I don't want to spoil for how they tie this movie together with the killer. And I think it was done really well. So the killer reveal of this movie is my next, like the whodunit, as you go through the movie wondering who it could possibly be. And then, of course, people getting killed and sort of whittling down who it could be throughout the movie. But then the movie throws you a twist at the end with the killer reveal, and it's something you can't see coming unless you've seen the movie already, and it's done really well. I think it's a really cool aspect to this whole movie. And that'll bring me to my dislikes of this movie. Now listen, I really enjoyed this movie and I like how they used time travel. I just didn't like how they got to the point of time travel in this movie. You've got a girl whose mom created time travel back in the 1980s, but nobody ever believed in her, and so just kind of sat there as this time machine photo booth, and it just happens to be there. There's just a lot of circumstances for this time machine aspect of the movie. Like, if they had found a better or cooler way for her to transport back to the 1980s, I think that would have worked a little better. But when you watch this movie, it's like there's a photo booth that is also doubling as a time machine, and then it gets broken and sends her back in time. And so you need that aspect of the movie. That's why I'm not trying to be too harsh on this aspect, but it's just a lot of coincidence. Like, oh, you just happen to be best friends with the girl whose mom created a time machine. Well, that was convenient. Like, you know what I mean? So that to me was the biggest issue I had with this movie, watching it, just like how they moved back in time. It wasn't the time travel necessarily, because I liked going back to the 1980s. Like I said, having someone from 2023 with 2023 goggles, seeing things go down in the 80s, I liked all of that. But just how they got her there, to me, it didn't work. It was just kind of shoehorned, like, okay, this is how we're going to force her back in time. That'll do. Like, they came up with this whole plot of the movie, and they're like, oh yeah, how are we going to send her back in time? Time machine photo booth. Yes, no, we'll just work the pieces together from there. That's what it feels like. And finally, my other dislike of this movie is the last act. It's kind of messy. It's hard to kind of follow along with everything going on, because you have all of the horror tropes of a horror movie and a whodunit movie, but you also have time travel aspects. So you really have to be locked in on this thing to understand each and every moving part, which is fine. You should be watching a movie, paying attention to a movie, but there was just a lot of moving parts in this movie. For instance, throughout the movie, I thought they did a really good job. Whenever she'd change something in the past, you'd then see people in the future seeing these events played out differently. Like if a girl was killed in the garage by the serial killer back in the day, and now she was killed on a bed, people in the future are now like, oh, wait a minute, what is going on here? I thought she was killed in the garage. That's how I remembered it, but here's pictures from the crime scene. Must be the Mandela effect. And I really liked that. I thought that was cool. Like, you see in real time things change in the past, and then people in the present like, oh, I remembered that differently. That's weird. Let me just put that down. And so I thought that aspect of it was cool. But at the very end of the movie, they get very convoluted with the time travel between her mom as a teenager, and the killer that's chasing them. They are going to this amusement park ride that now doubles as a time machine, because again, they just kind of throw in whatever they need to as a time machine. And there's just a lot of moving pieces. I guess ultimately it makes sense to me what they did and how they did it, but it's just, you really have to be locked in on it. And I wish they had found a way to make it less convoluted, to explain time travel at the very end and how it was going to work with the killers doing what they're doing. Overall, I had a totally fun time with Totally Killer, and I totally recommend it to all of you. I'm going to stop saying totally now, but I think one of the reasons I had such a good time with this movie was the laughs they were able to sort of pepper into this movie. Like, throughout the movie, you're seeing these hyper-violent moments with the killer, but you're also getting these laughs in every other scene that really worked for me. Again, all the stuff they did in the 80s worked for me, but it was sort of the laughs they were able to pepper in. Like, you were really able to lock in on this movie and just enjoy yourself while watching this whodunit horror movie. And the final thing I'll say about this movie is that the mask for the killer in this movie, I don't think it's going to go down as anything special, and that's too bad, because I think if they had really gotten the mask to the next level, we might have had a really fun time with it. But it's just this weird smiling mask with this earring. I get that it's 80s, but it just didn't work for me personally. I'm never going to put that on for the camera, although who knows, I just made a video where I put the Scream mask on, and maybe when the original Scream came out, if I was reviewing movies way back when, I would have been like, that mask won't go anywhere. Although, let's be honest, that's an iconic mask. But yeah, the mask for this movie just didn't work for me. Every time I saw it, I kind of thought, well, that's a goofy mask. Like, I don't know why they chose that. Although, again, you never know how masks take off. Maybe this movie will be huge and this mask will take off and be on my wall one day as horror masks that I love. We'll see. But those are just my opinions, because that's my review for Totally Killer. Guys, if you've seen Totally Killer and you've got thoughts and you've got comments, throw that in the comment section down below. Let me know if you agree or disagree with me on anything, because I'd love to know your thoughts on this movie and see where we agree or disagree. And finally, guys, if you like this review, don't forget to hit the like button, because it helps the video, it helps the channel, and it helps me right here. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Alright guys, we got to the end of the Totally Killer review, and I had a really fun time making this review. I had an even better time watching this movie. I hope we get more horror movies like this, like just having a good time with themselves, not taking themselves too serious, but ultimately giving the fans a good amount of horror, slasherness. Yeah, that works for me. That's the genre that fits best for me. It's probably why Scream is my favorite franchise. With all that said though guys, if you like this and you want to check out more videos on my channel, I've got all of my 2022 reviews right there, or all of my 2023 reviews right there.